In these times of uncertainty, it's all the more important that we keep collaborating, informing, and inspiring each other, so that we can be smarter and better tomorrow. Welcome to the Pakhuis de Zwijger livecast.
Good evening and welcome at the live cast of Pakhuis de Zwijger named The Wellbeing Economy. My name is Dion and I'm the moderator of today. This program is a first in a series about the well-being economy, where we will discuss what the well-being economy entails and also how we can implement this theory in practice. We will talk about this and much more with 4 experts, and I would like to introduce to them. First of all, in the studio, I have with me Kees Klomp, founding partner of the Thrive Institute. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And unfortunately, via Zoom, I have 3 beautiful ladies. First of all, Naja Awaki, strategic and concept developer for the Creative and Inclusive City. We have Catherine Trebek. She does advocacy and influencing lead for the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. And Nikki Pau, associate professor in economics of well-being. Welcome. Thank you very much for participating in this very interesting program. Like I said, we're going to talk about the well-being economy, but maybe it's nice to, first of all, come to a correct definition of economic in general. Naja, can I ask that question to you?
Yes, I just shared some quotes around the different definition of the economics. Maybe we can already show them.
Okay.
Yes. I just made a selection. I Googled to see what we can find when we Google economics. The reason why I would like to start first by what is the definition of economics, because in my daily work, I come to see that people start identifying the study of economics with the market. It became the same thing. While if we look at the broader definition of economics, and I hope this is a starting definition that we maybe can agree upon, the study of how individuals, governments, businesses make choices that affect the allocation of distribution of scarce resources. So if we look at the graphic underneath, so you have the scarce resources and you have the people's needs, and we say these needs are actually unlimited. So the science is actually how to optimize these two. I find this a really broad definition that gives us a lot of opportunities to actually steer the economy. But I think in the current mindset, we really identify economics with the market. And it has a lot of assumptions, actually, when it comes to human behavior, that we're individualistic, that we are really rational beings, that we calculate everything with no emotion, we do research, and then we make the best rational decision. And these assumptions actually have been built around time. While looking at the picture just behind Kees, actually I think it's really important to have a clear definition about economics that gives us actual space to talk about the new economy. And yeah, I think this is a really first important step in creating a base on what is economics.
Yes.
So we don't get trapped actually in this continuous debate, which is actually about the marketplace, which is a part of the economy.
Thank you very much for this definition.
Nikki, just to create some confusion maybe, but yeah.
Nikki, do you agree with this definition?
Well, I agree with Nadja saying that the economy is about making choices, but it's more than that. It's also I see the economy as a process that is embedded in social and political institutions. And if we look at our economic textbooks, conventional economics, they define the economy as, or they represent the economy as this closed system. But the truth of the matter is that the economy is open to social and political influences which determine how economic processes evolve and what outcomes are created, who gets what and why, and what do we use up in the economy, what do we preserve. So it's really a socially and politically embedded process, the way I see the economy.
So you've just added something on the definition that Nadja proposed. Catherine?
I didn't propose any definition. I just wanted to really open up this discussion. What do we understand with economics?
Because I think it's very important, because it's a question that often is not being asked, and the synchronization about which definition we use is often forgotten. So therefore, I said thank you very much for proposing which definition to use, and the added value that Nikki just brought in. Kees was nodding his head as well, but I saw Catherine also nodding. So Catherine, can you maybe add something as well, or say, no, I want to use another definition?
Oh, I'll just add two, because I think the definitions that we've got already on the table are quite sound from Nikki and Nadja. What I'd add is two different ways, or two additional ways of thinking about the economy. One is that the origins of the term economy, as a lot of folks will know, is household management. And that's really how we distribute and share resources and take care of each other. But I think if we confine our thinking there to just the house, where we live, our immediate home, we're missing that it's also about how we take care of other people in the community and how we take care of our planetary home, our Mother Nature as well. And I often like to think about the economy as a provisioning system. To me, it's never the goal in and of itself, but often some of the confusion is that often our media or our politics sees the economy as the ultimate objective. And I think that's partly the reason why our world has got into some of the challenges that we face today. And the metaphor that helps me understand the difference is, imagine if we're trying to get across a stream or a small river, and the objective is to get to the other side. So that's the goal. But to get there, we need to put our feet on some stones and think about the stones of the economy. We want there to be enough to go around so that everyone can have a foothold and something steady. We don't want them to be slippery or precarious. And we want them to take us on that journey. And so it's almost the economy is part of the vehicle, it's part of the mechanism to reach what I'd describe as a higher order goal. And that's when it comes about thinking about what's well-being being the higher order goal. The economy needs to be in service of that. And that takes us into quite a different conversation about what sort of economic system we need. And that, of course, covers taxes, jobs, the nature of businesses, how we design our infrastructure, what happens in the home as well. As Nadja was saying, that's often not priced because it's outside the formal paid market. All those sorts of things, how we treat the environment, all of that is part of how we design the economy.
Kees, what's your vision about this?
Well, of course, I completely agree with all the ladies there. But I'm also very much influenced by the definition that's been termed by E.F. Schumacher, which is an Austrian economist. He's my all-time favorite economist. And later on, Greer, which wasn't an economist but an ecologist, and he further built upon his theory. And what he makes a distinction between three sorts of economies. Yeah? So he makes a distinction between a primary economy, a secondary economy, and a tertiary economy. And his definition of the primary economy is actually the ecology. So he says that if we look at the biosphere, if we look at nature, it is actually giving us humans all the necessary tools that we need to be able to create that secondary economy, which is the human economy, which is the economy that is mostly used and interpreted in the textbooks. And then he also defines the tertiary economy as the financial economy, which is the economy that is now so dramatically growing with stock markets and etc. And what I really like,
probably if you ask a person in society what's the definition of economy, people will refer to the financial part of economy.
Yeah, but what is really important, I think, about this distinction is that what Schumacher called this meta-economics. So he takes the broad perspective. So he takes the complete view, and I think one of the problems that we are facing today, and which is also the subject about well-being, is that the problem is that if you look from a well-being perspective or a health perspective, then the primary economy should be key, should be the biggest. And then, build upon that primary is a healthy secondary economy and then a healthy tertiary economy. And now the problem is that basically the triangle is turned upside down. Yes. So the primary economy is very small and the tertiary economy is very big. And that is unsustainable.
So how does it fit in our economy? Oh, sorry.
Nikki
wants to say something. Nikki.
Yeah, following up to what you said and also to what Dionne said, it is indeed true. If you talk to people about the economy, many would say it is about money. But as a matter of fact, it's about much more than that. Yeah. It's about how we distribute and use our resources and how the economy can serve us to our well-being. So I like the relationship that Kees is drawing out, the human-nature relationship, because that is often overlooked when we talk about the economy. Yet we are reliant on the resources that are provided by the environment to prosper now and in the future.
Dionne, can I just add to that? Because that recognition is really quite a fundamental departure from conventional thinking that either sees the economy as being at the top, or if you get some of those sustainable development images, you often hear talk of the three pillars. So you have society, economy, and nature, and you have them all as if they're all in parallel and all this, similar sense of importance. But what Kees is outlining there is what ecological economists would describe as the embedded nature of our economy, how you've got this sort of financial economy exists as a subset of our social economy. And of course, those two exist as a subset of the wider natural world. And understanding that way of thinking and that profound reality really opens up a whole different way of looking at the goals and the way the economy needs to operate. But it is quite a massive mindset shift that's really urgently needed in not just conversations like this, but the corridors of power and boardrooms in businesses around the world.
Yes, thank you for that. Naja?
I just actually want to pick up on something Catherine said previously, the fact that we are able to design our economic system. So we, as a people, are actually in charge how we design the system. So looking at our goals, we can actually define what we want to work towards to, and we can design a system. And I think it's good just to mark that, that is something that we actually design.
Yeah, because Kees, how does everything what you just said fit in the way we created the system at this point?
Well, that we're in shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So well, I think one of the key problems is, like Catherine just said, that we don't acknowledge the biosphere and nature as being the basis of everything, actually, and that everything derives from that basis. So we have created this an illusion, because it is an illusion that economy is key, and it's not. And that's why this phase that we're in right now, I like to call it the phase of phantom debate. So we're debating, we have moral debates about all sorts of sectors and industries, about how to maintain those industries and keep them growing and change the economy, it's delusional.
You're saying a lot. Face of phantom debate.
It's a phantom debate, yes.
Do you agree with that, Nikki?
I think there's a timely moment to rethink the economy from scratch at this moment. I thought the moment was already there with the last financial crisis, but we let it pass. So I'm trying to seize this moment now, and there's really a sense of urgency in that. I mean, if we look at the difficulties with which people have to cope with the current crisis, new dividing lines show up, inequality is rising, green investments are put on hold. So I really think this is an opportunity to rethink the fundamentals of the economic narrative. And instead of placing this rational economic agent at the center of it, I would like to go back to, the real world and put an image of a real human being at the center, who values social relationships, who is recognizant of the mutual dependency on our natural environment. And from there on, look again at what we expect from the economy and how can we steer it in such a way that it actually services humanity.
So does that mean that you're actually referring to the fact that we need to talk about the well-being economy?
Yes, definitely. I think if we put human well-being at the center of the economy instead of GDP growth, all of a sudden had this conversation about multiple values, multiple objectives is possible. Whereas if we only steer for GDP growth and think about how to repair the environment or how to recover social cost ex post, I think we are making the wrong decisions. Inequality in the city of Amsterdam, for example, is growing. It was already higher than the national average. It's the Gini index at the moment is 0.41, I believe. And there is a sense that it is growing. In the Netherlands, it's 0.28. It's the economy of the city is going into a direction that is really cutting some groups of people off from participating in society and in the economy. And I find that really worrisome.
Catherine, why do you think the well-being economy is a better alternative for what we're having at the moment?
Well, I guess at its heart, because it's about having the economy serve humanity rather than the other way around. And the simplest way to me of describing what a well-being economy is about social justice on a healthy planet. If that's our goal, that creates the imperative that we look at all the economic policies, all sorts of legislation, all sorts of incentive structures, how businesses are designed. Are they for profit in and of itself, or are they utilizing profit as a vehicle to deliver other goals, but also how we share and distribute? And just building on what Nikki was just saying there, if you look back over the last year, what is it that has kept communities going? I mean, here in the UK at least, I can only imagine it's fairly similar in the Netherlands. What's kept communities going has been the care economy, so families looking after each other and communities looking after neighbours. That, of course, doesn't do anything to GDP. We've been cherishing much more than ever our state-provided health systems and really turning to the state for the investment in science to find a vaccine. Of course, all the healthcare workers to help support people who are catching COVID. We're also appreciating more than ever the teachers and the education system. So often that's provided by the state as well. But also things like the foundational economy, or maybe things like the community wealth building agenda. At least where I am, it has been the small locally owned shops that have kept going and that haven't had shortages. So again, it's about local supply chains as well. And from that, you get a sense of the sum of the pieces of the jigsaw, because to build a wellbeing economy, we need thousands of changes. It's not an easy one policy. And I get very frustrated so often. I suspect all my colleagues do, are so often asked, what's the one thing you would do? It's so much more complicated than that. But we get a sense from the last year about some of the sort of changes that we really need to roll out. We've also seen that business models such as cooperatives have actually been more resilient in the last 12 months in that moment of economic turmoil. It's business models that are designed to serve their members rather than extracting wealth upwards. I mean, I do say that knowing that who is one of the people who's done best out of COVID, the owner of Amazon, who has, of course, been so active in extracting wealth. And there you have an example of just the sort of thing that a wellbeing economy needs to challenge.
Yes. Kees, you were nodding your head. You agree with everything that Catherine just said?
Yes, more than that, and it's also something I would like to emphasize, because the risk is that we use well-being economy or economics as the next buzzword. It really sounds really nice. Well-being, you know, it's like happiness. It's who doesn't want well-being? But what I really think is important, it is a fundamental difference. It is really fundamental. So
it's truly a different way of thinking and
yes, and because I've read both Nikki's book and Catherine's book, and they both discuss it in their books, and they didn't mention it, so let me mention it for them.
Okay.
We were earlier talking about sort of a phantom debate, a sort of a moral phantom debate about choices that we have to make. But same goes for the distinction between welfare and well-being. So, and especially in the Netherlands, where we now have broad welfare, brede welvaart, which sort of is well-being, but not entirely. So it creates a suggestion that it is, you know, it's just a little tweak of what we are doing at the moment.
So what is the fundamental change?
Well, the fundamental difference is that if you look at the current system, it's based upon the premise that more welfare or wealth results in more well-being. So if we let the economy grow, if our wealth grows, if our living standard goes up, the assumption is that our well-being goes up as well. And we have learned by now, and Catherine calls this overdevelopment in her book, that it's actually not true anymore. So since the 1960s in the Netherlands, and I know in the UK as well, in the US, we are in a phase of overdevelopment, which means that welfare growth is not helping well-being, but it's hurting well-being. So there is a decrease of well-being because of an increase in welfare. So the most important thing I think that we have to do to acknowledge the well-being economy is acknowledging the fact that well-being is something completely different than welfare.
Okay, maybe I'm going to ask that question to Nikki, because
Nikki can tell a lot more about it.
You wrote a book as well about well-being economics. Can you tell us more about this?
Well, it is indeed true the way the concept of welfare has evolved in conventional economics is the way that Kees explains it. It's very much tied to the increase in productivity in the economy, and the underlying assumption being that an increase in productivity will come to the benefit of all, which has been shown is not the case. I would like to give the example in the recent crisis in the Netherlands at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. We found out that we had taken huge risks in our health system by relying on one supplier from one country specifically to supply necessary health equipment to our country, and that line stopped. And this created a huge risk for the health of our people, undermining well-being, because in the past the decision had been made in terms of it was an efficient decision to make a big deal with this company and not with another company or with more than one company, because that's simply not cost efficient. And these kind of trade-offs, these kind of economic decisions are often quite narrowly made and under the assumption that if we do a cost-benefit analysis, this is most efficient and this will then benefit our economy and thus the people in the economy. And this proved not to be the case. I mean, the risk had been enormous, there have been enormous delays, and it would have been much better to spread risks and maybe after doing that, choose a cost-efficient solution. But first, you try to protect the health of the population, which is what well-being is also about.
So Naja,
Yeah, I just wanted to add something actually also based on a previous remark Nikki made about that it's also a social political construct. It's part of it. And what you see actually is that a lot of these economic assumptions in the current economic thinking actually have been internalized in our political system and how we look at society. The fact that governments talk about efficiency, about the fact that, if we serve the market and they will create wealth, that's the way we can actually create well-being indeed for the population. And if there's a mismatch, we can fix this by social policy. And I think the fact that, for instance, if we look at elections, so we have all the different parties we can choose. But if we look at the economic policy, for instance, most of them all assume the fact that within the current economic narrative, but people actually don't choose about this. It's given to us as a fact. So a lot of things are presented as a fact. While if you start looking closely, like the example Nikki gave, or the fact that Amazon is actually a monopoly, killing the markets, killing creativity, killing competition. And yeah, I think it's, again, really important to open up people's eyes, also within the mainstream, taking this academic debate, because looking at economists around the world, this is actually the mainstream. This is the economic thinking, which is dominant, or maybe I'm like looking at my own bubble. But I really find it really interesting on, how can we take this knowledge, this debate within the academics to society, to actually start creating this mindset in a really broad sense, because then the social, the political can also start redesigning the system.
I think it's a really good question. Catherine, can you maybe help us with answering that question?
Of how to redesign the system.
Yeah, but then where the people in society can be part of that redefining.
Well, they have to be a part of it. I mean, there's no point doing it if people aren't going to be at the forefront, if it's not going to be led by what people need, if it's not going to have the goals of things like fairness, dignity, connection for people at the very heart of why we're doing this. But also what's really heartening to me is that we see that people around the world are already starting to build a wellbeing economy in their own spheres of influence, in their own communities, in their own businesses, or in their own local governments, or even in some high national governments or devolved regional governments. We're already seeing people starting to recognize that we cannot go on with an economic system that is extracting from people and extracting from nature with all these outdated economic constructs, and efficiency is a really, really good example of that, just how much that mantra has pushed the planet and pushed humanity to the brink. And so what really is heartening is how many examples we see that I think not only in terms of the impact, in terms of their local footprint and the difference they'll make to people that interact with them, they're also really significant because what they do is prove that a different way is possible. We see this alternative already starting to bubble up. one of my intellectual heroes, Gar Alperovitz, talks about being in the prehistory of the next economic revolution. And we're starting to see the seeds of what it looks like. And I think that's important because then we can say to politicians, there is no excuse. This isn't a step into the unknown. We know what this looks like. We see it in businesses that are using commercial viability to benefit the environment or to create benefits for workers or local communities.
Can you give us a more practical example of how we can see this?
I mean, it's all over. One of my favorite examples is just down the road from me. There's a brilliant local business here called Green City Whole Foods. The nickname for Glasgow, where I'm based, is the Dear Green Place. So it's playing on that environmental aspect. But this is a workers' cooperative. It's been in existence since the 70s. They provide, particularly to businesses that are doing the refill now. I don't know if it's the same in the Netherlands, but everyone's starting to recognize that just the plastic scourge. So they're providing things like honey and chickpeas, but they're doing that in order to benefit their worker members. And they've got about 50 worker members. They all vote on decisions around the business. Just here in my hand, this is something that will be very familiar to all of you, the Fairphone. It's accredited B Corp, and it's designed to very directly challenge that deliberate planned obsolescence of, not mentioning any names, but other types of mobile phones, where tiny thing breaks, you have to throw away your whole phone. Whereas I recently had to replace the camera, and easy, I keep this old piece going. And it's that sort of mindset that we're cherishing nature. We're not seeing the planet as something just to extract from and throw away. There are so many examples of that. Nikki, I hope, is going to add to that.
Thank you. Yeah, Nikki, please add on that.
Yes, indeed, we need everybody in this. And for me, it also, because of my work environment, it starts with young people who are interested in economics, but sometimes put off because the way the profession and the discipline has evolved into this very, quantitative type of science that presents itself often not even as a social science, whereas to me, of course, economics, it's about people making choices. It is a social science. So we are now working with one economy that is rewriting curricula at middle school, for the economics courses to really, come to these different ideas about the economy and tell a different narrative. So it starts with young students who come into the economic discipline with these broader ideas about the economy, and not being put off by these narrow textbooks. And other example I would like to mention is much more at national level of the nation state, countries like Finland and New Zealand, who have leaders who officially adopted a well-being budget and a well-being agenda for the nation state. In Finland, we see the well-being economy being promoted by Marin, along the lines of sustainability, social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And in New Zealand, we see Ardern drafting an agenda that basically ditches GDP.
Can I just add quickly to the government's point? Well, because it's really exciting. This is some news almost hot off the press, is that Finland has become the latest government to join a partnership called the Wellbeing Economy Governments Partnership. So it's Finland, New Zealand, Iceland, Wales, and Scotland, and they're all collaborating to figure out how to put collective well-being in the heart of policy making. Sorry, Nikki. Just
No. I'm glad. And indeed, countries are making their own choices. Of course, they set their own priorities. In New Zealand, they really want to invest in reducing child poverty, in reducing inequalities of indigenous people, investing in mental health. So these are country-specific choices, but I think within a well-being economy agenda, there's room for that. And you can explain to people why that is a priority at that point in time, and that will ultimately benefit the economy as a whole.
So our government is not doing those things, not yet. Well, Kees is not really looking really optimistic. But there are a lot of projects in society which are tapping in the well-being economy.
Oh yes.
Mindset.
Yes.
Naja, you're leading a project in Amsterdam with citizens. Maybe you can tell something more about what you're doing.
Yeah, we're currently, it's a program in which we're going to work with key figures in neighborhoods to create community health and wealth building. We actually added the health because it's not only about wealth. And the reason for doing this is I really believe in the fact that like you can be what you can't see. So we actually, are working with this system, which is not working, but what is the alternative? And Catherine already said, there are so many good examples that it is doable, it is realistic, but to actually make this to create more space for this type of initiatives, we need new regulations. We need a government actually that draws boundaries when it comes to the financial market or monopolies. And with this project, we actually want to empower people, but also show them alternatives. And by actually doing the exercise of designing a different system on a really local scale, which also allows to actually see how we can work with informal care networks. Like if we talk about efficiency and being flexible, like this is the best example. And I think we all saw this in this COVID times, because we created all these big systems and organizations to actually do this more efficient. But we actually see now that when organizing something really local, that is able, because of the connectivity and visibility, to create systems that are really create well-being with less resources actually as well. So I find this a really I see this program actually to create this new narrative, to show that we can actually do so much better.
Yeah. Thank you.
And bring this actually also in neighborhoods with the biggest urgency, where you really see that the inequality is really undermining people's livelihood.
Yes. Kees, you want to add something as well?
Yeah, Nadja just mentioned something which I think is really key, which is the narrative.
Yeah.
So I focus with my professorship at the Rotterdam University of Applied Science first and foremost on the narrative, because what I encounter in a lot of circumstances is that a lot of students mix up well-being and welfare.
Yeah.
So their ideas of what a happy, healthy life is very much associated with living standard. And it's not because they're stupid, but it's because that is the society they have grown up in. Mm-hmm. So I think that it is really, really important to start with the basics, which is to start changing the narrative. And I sometimes call this regrowth rather than degrowth. So if we want to let well-being grow, then we have to degrow the importance of wealth and welfare, and that means
can citizens change that narrative?
Yeah, because you just heard a lot of examples,
yeah.
And the best way to change the narrative is to have people experience the real deal, so to say, to experience well-being. Because once people recognize and acknowledge the fact that living standard is something completely different than living quality. Or living conditions, then they are much more open to also change their fundamental look on what economics is, rather than working within the same frame. So we can call it different, but if we don't change the rules of the game, then also well-being economics remains economics in the way that we currently do economics.
Yeah, we tapped a little bit into the role of citizens, of government.
Yeah.
Well, not government here in the Netherlands, but government overseas. What is the role of businesses? Is there a role?
Yes. A lot of businesses are part of the problem, and that means that they're also part of the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And the good news is that a lot of companies, more and more companies, start to take their responsibility much more serious and become proactively, and not only achieving incremental change, but also transformational change, like really changing the system for the better. But I do think that, especially for big business, for corporates,
the multinationals,
the challenges are incredibly big because they're so much depending on the current system. So I have a lot more faith in the store that Catherine was just mentioning on the corner, and workers' cooperatives and commons and all these new initiatives, but which actually develop from the bottom up.
I can imagine that this theory, that with this theory also a lot of challenges will come up. Catherine, can you maybe take us away with the challenges that we can face with this theory?
To be honest, my sense of what the challenges are changes depending on what day it is.
Oh.
But because sometimes I really think the greatest challenge actually is our collective lack of imagination. That our sense that actually we're stuck with this system, and the best we can do is to just help people survive and cope with the current system. And Nikki, go on.
Well, the challenges are huge, I think, and it's not only the narrative. To me, it's very important that we also reconsider the ways in which we work, the methods with which we evaluate the economy and make economic decisions. Because if we do not work from a shared framework, the way let's say an economic policy domain makes a decision is very different from people in a social policy domain. And last but not least, we also need to rethink what performance indicators we use to assess how well the economy is doing. GDP is this hugely important measure. But why don't we look at the extent to which we manage to curb inequality as a performance of how the economy is doing? Simon Kuznets, a Nobel Prize winner in economics in 1934, already said that the welfare of a nation can scarcely be measured or be informed by a measurement of national income. And being aware that GDP can never be equated with well-being. So I think we need to really target this at three levels: the narrative, the methods of work, the framework with which we work, and indicators.
Indicators, yes. Yeah, Kees, this is really your cup of tea, I think. Which key performance indicators do we need to use?
Well, I really like, Catherine has one very interesting example with girls on bikes. Maybe you can share it, Catherine. I think that's the most wonderful indicator I've ever heard. So
okay.
Is that just because the Netherlands would race to the top of the league tables with that one? So I've been working on alternatives to GDP for a long time. And of course, there are plenty of different initiatives and projects out there. It's even been described as the beyond GDP world has been described as the Wild West. There are so many different examples. So we're not short of projects. But what really strikes me about those is that they start often very well intentioned, wanting to benefit communities, benefit society, but they very quickly become very technical manifestations of issues around quality of life. And they enter the terrain of dashboards and indicators and metrics. And most normal people, when they're talking about dashboards and indicators, they're talking about their car, not their hope for the future or their quality of life or how their kids are. And so I think we need to find a way to close or have a feedback loop back to communities so that communities really see themselves in these alternative measures, that they resonate with them intuitively, and then they go and demand that their politicians pay attention to these. And so the example I give to illustrate that, and I think we need several of these, maybe half a dozen, but the example I give to illustrate it is, imagine if the mayors of our cities or our governments went into, say, the next Dutch election saying, under my watch, I want to focus on increasing the number of girls who ride their bikes to school. Because if that number is going up, we know that all sorts of important contextual factors are in place that will add to the quality of life of people. Naja, sorry.
That's funny.
No, just like totally agree. Just wanted to add like a dashboard or something can become really technical. So that's why it should be underlined with a narrative so that we can actually make this connection. And when it comes to solution, I think to be aware of the fact that we can actually, like the government has a big role to play. In our current times, it's like the companies are, we place really limited limitations to the market. So they actually, we allow for extraction, we allow for exploitation. And I think I really believe in also starting with regulations, because then you can actually start steering businesses. For instance, if we would lower the taxes on social enterprises that actually steer towards multiple values, not only the financial value, you know, we can start stimulating this part of the economy if we would start taxing certain businesses. So I think we can do much more actually to, that we have much more power that we can use also within politics, especially because I really feel a sense of urgency, of course, when it comes to the climate, but also looking at the city of Amsterdam, what Nikki just pointed out, you know, enhanced by COVID, you know, people are really suffering within this economic system. And of course, it's relative if you look, you know, around the world. So, you know, to become aware of this sense of urgency. So I really see, you know, we're breaking up this paradigms and trying to make fundamental changes in how we think, but also to create more urgency around this topic. Yeah.
Nikki, one of the projects that you're working on is entitled as Fearless Amsterdam. And Kees starts laughing.
Yeah,
can you maybe
cool
tell
title.
some? It's a cool title. It is. Like, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, thank you, Diona. I just wanted to I raised my hand to mention that, but that is not my project. This is the Fearless City program within the municipality of Amsterdam. That has asked the University of Amsterdam, us as researchers, to explore the potential of a well-being dashboard for the city of Amsterdam. And I think this is an example of an urban government, hopefully taking the lead in bringing this new narrative and framework further. But we're still in the exploration stage. But so far, I can tell that there is a broader need for actually knowing how people in Amsterdam are really doing, because the economic reports don't really report on these issues, and there are several initiatives out there that do. So there's the state of the city, and there's also, people are also looking in the possibility of the donut index for the city of Amsterdam. So there are all sorts of good initiatives out there, but they're they're not so much interconnected, and they don't translate yet into this integrated framework. And as a result, they run the risk of being an add-on to the economic narrative that we already know. And then you have the next index that hangs up in the air, but is not actually put to use. So I'm really I think it's really great that the municipality of Amsterdam, under the leadership of the Fearless City program, is taking this initiative to look for the potential and how to implement this in the daily practice of urban policy makers, of researchers in the city, and of policy implementers.
Thank you.
And in the next stage, we're going to link up with Nadia also. So
yeah, because that was what I wanted to say, because Kees wanted to react, but I thought Nadia was also part of this project. Do you want to add something on what Nikki just said?
Yeah. Just that we are, like, in the coming months, we're going to try to actually connect the development of this integrated dashboard with the community health and wealth building program to actually, like, almost give it a face. And in that sense, like, connecting a holistic view of a human being who doesn't only, tries to get more money because that's happiness, like a holistic human point of view actually has all these values. And from there, to connect it actually with the dashboard, we try to make it, really define these indicators and how they are connected. So, yeah, I think it's an important step to as a city, create policy in which we have, that we work towards multiple values.
Yeah, clear. Thank you. Kees, you wanted to react.
Yeah, well, I would also like to raise the subject of, let's call it the Fearless University, or the Fearless University of Applied Science, because I think that we also need to take a good hard look on the profession of, and there's also the education of economics and economy students. And so, just an example, if I would have my way, and I'm working on it, I don't have it yet, but I think I'm getting there. I think my students in the next year, they will start, the first book they will read is a handbook ecology, because I think that is where economy starts. And at this moment, that is completely unfeasible, because economics is a subject, and it has lots of study materials, and ecology is not one of the subjects within it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a problem. So I would also like to call out for other people working in education to fully embrace the multidisciplinarity of economics, involving sociologists, psychologists, anthropologists, biologists within the field, and not as the flavor of the month, but as the core of what economy should be like. We have to integrate all these different elements of a healthy, well-being-driven society, in my opinion.
So, Nikki is associate professor. We're going to ask her, do you want to embrace this suggestion of Kees?
Very much so. I think, economists are typically employed in positions that they are close to policy making, whether that is in companies, in multilateral institutions, or in governments. There is a heavy reliance on economic analysis in political decision making. So to train our future economists according to this vision of well-being economy, I think it's tremendously important. There are, of course, trends in economics. I mean, if you look at the past, I remember when I studied as an economics student, economics at the University of Amsterdam, we had courses like political economy, gender economy, the history of economic thought, and they all disappeared, which I find a shame, because then you don't train students anymore in asking critical questions about why do we define labor in this way?
It's weird
why don't we define unpaid labor as labor? Or why do we see the care economy as something outside the economy?
So what's the reason why those topics aren't part anymore of the curricula?
Well, I can't look in the reasons why they made these decisions, but across the board, I would say there has been this trend towards developing the economics discipline into this objective science that relies very much on quantitative analysis, quantitative indicators, things that can be measured, that can be put into a model, and gives as a prediction another number. But I think people making decisions on the economy, it's a complex affair, and therefore I think we need to bring these topics back, as Kay said, into the economics education, and also train students in asking basic questions about why do we need this economic model, or can't we have multiple models and think more in terms of scenarios, and don't rely on an economic model only, because it also leads to all sorts of false predictions.
I think critical thinking of students need to be stimulated throughout all courses. So I think we can find each other. Naja, you wanted to react on this as well.
And then I got totally lost in Nikki's story.
Naja, just while you're coming back to your thought, and just I can add to partly why some of those what have been dismissed as heterodox economic thinking have been pushed to the margins. I mean, it is in a way quite deliberate. I mean, since the 70s, there has been this influence and very concerted effort to rarefy a certain type of economics, to invest in certain think tanks to influence government, to insert people with certain mindset into the corridors of power. And if anyone wants to Google anything after this, there's something to Google called the Powell Memorandum. This is written by a guy called Jonathan Powell in the 70s. He went on to become a US Supreme Court judge, and he has written about really what the big business needed to do to push back against labor unions, to push back against the rise of environmental regulation that we saw in the 70s, particularly in the US. And you read this document today, and you could almost sit there ticking off his instructions of what actually played out in the coming years and decades. So it's been a very, very deliberate marginalization of a diversity of thinking and a rarefication, I think almost a fetishization of a very narrow economic mindset. So it's almost very sinister if you look at it that way.
I think it's really interesting what you say, but we need to wrap it up a little bit. And what you just brought in is, I think, a whole another topic to discuss a whole hour about. So I'm so sorry also for the viewers that we can't go further into that. But maybe the next time, because it is a series of programs about the well-being economy. Naja, you also wanted to react, but please don't react on what Catherine just said.
Yeah. It's just funny because I actually want to make the same remark, because I have read a report how it went in the Netherlands, how actually a lobby started talking about the fact that the government isn't efficient, that the marketplace should organize certain stuff. And, they really put certain parameters and put something, as a given, which defined the whole economic discourse from the 90s in the Netherlands till now. And I find it fascinating, because I'm looking, how can we play the same game, actually, in, turning it back. But it was funny that it was like the same, thinking.
So to wrap it up, because we discussed a lot about what the well-being economy is, what the challenges are, why it needs to be implemented. Kees, to start with you, is it realistic to implement the well-being economy in our society, in the Dutch society?
Yes, because if you reverse the question, then the question would be, is it feasible to keep going on with welfare economy or welfare economics? And the answer is no. So I think it is, well-being is the new license to operate.
Perfect, thank you. Nikki, what do you think?
I'm always optimistic. I like to think, given the many solutions these days that are found outside the market to improve human well-being, are a showcase for that it is possible to rethink the economy in terms of well-being economy.
Thank you. Naja?
I'm, of course, trying to stay optimistic, and I really see a momentum, but I also see a risk in using the word well-being and not making the fundamental change. This is something you see, for instance, the right, the neoliberal party, the VVD in the Netherlands, they say, yeah, we have this excess thing in the market that we should fix. So I think it's a danger, that people are going to use the same words, but not make the fundamental change from the start. So I think we also have to, be really sharp on that we tweak on the right buttons that should be changed.
We're going to discuss that next Wednesday as well. Catherine. Yes.
I'm really lucky. I work for an organization that's made up of people all over the world who are already implementing this. So I think it's entirely realistic, and I'm really excited about, I think that the idea that change is necessary from last year, particularly the experience of COVID, I think people are ready and willing to implement change. So I'm on the side of optimism that this can happen.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I need to wrap up the program for today. Thank you all. Thank you to the speakers, Kees, Nikki, Naja, and Catherine. Of course, also for the viewers, thank you for your digital presence. Pakhuis de Zwijger broadcasts the program every working day. Check our website for the full details. Programs like this can only exist because of you. Go to the website pakhuisdezwijger.nl and please pay as you like. You see it behind me right now. Help us out. Pay as you like. And next Wednesday, we will meet again, and then we will talk more about the implementation of the well-being economy, especially in Amsterdam. And for now, I can only say, have a nice evening, stay healthy. My name is Dion, and I'm from Easy Solutions. Thank you very much. Thank you.